Sir, stop right there. ICE, we need to see documentation.
I'm a firefighter with engine 14. There are people trapped in that building.
Citizenship documentation, now.
This is my badge. That's my fire. Call dispatch.
A firefighter in full turnout gear runs toward a burning building with 3 civilians trapped inside. 2 ICE agents step into his path and put him in handcuffs. Darnell Cooper is 32 years old, 8-year veteran of Engine Company 14. 37 confirmed rescues, 6 commendations for valor. The city's Firefighter of the Year, 2 years running. A man whose entire professional existence is built around running toward the thing everyone else runs from. On the morning of April 3rd, Darnell is responding to a 4-alarm structure fire at a residential apartment building on Crane Street. 3 civilians confirmed trapped on the 4th floor. His engine company is already deploying. He is 40 feet from the entrance when ICE agents Carlos Vasquez and Timothy Mills step into his path. Neither agent has a warrant. Neither has a specific target. They have been working the Crane Street corridor since 6:30 a.m. under a broad enforcement directive. Darnell Cooper is not in their database. He is simply black, and he is running, and that is enough. This detention will last 22 minutes. In those 22 minutes, a 67-year-old woman on the 4th floor will sustain smoke inhalation injuries her physicians will later confirm caused permanent lung damage. Fire Chief Sandra Okafor will drive her command vehicle directly across the ICE transport vehicle's path and refuse to move until federal supervisors order release. And the lawsuit that follows will result in a $16.1 million settlement that rewrites federal enforcement policy nationwide. Type "responding while black" if you understand why a burning building 40 feet away was not enough to stop this. This story proves that in America, no uniform, no badge, no insignia, and no building visibly on fire behind you can guarantee that a black man will be allowed to do his job. Darnell Cooper grew up 2 miles from the firehouse where he now works, 3rd of 5 children. Raised by a single mother who worked double shifts as a hospital administrator to keep the family in their home on Crane Street, the same street where 8 years into his career, he will be handcuffed 40 feet from a burning building. He was the kid who organized things, pickup games, neighborhood cleanups, the unofficial peacekeeper in every situation that needed one. The kid who at 16 helped an elderly neighbor out of a smoke-filled kitchen after a grease fire and stood in the street afterward thinking, "I want to do that. I want to do that every day." He joined the fire department at 24, straight out of a 2-year emergency services program at the community college. Made full firefighter in his 2nd evaluation cycle. Earned his technical rescue certification in year 3, his hazmat certification in year 5. By year 7, he was the youngest person in Engine Company 14's history to be recommended for lieutenant. 37 confirmed rescues. 6 commendations for valor. Firefighter of the Year 2 years running. Outside the firehouse, he is the person his neighborhood calls when something goes wrong. He runs a youth fire safety program at 3 local elementary schools. He coaches flag football on weekends. He is the person who shows up for a neighbor who needs help moving, for a kid who needs a responsible adult to talk to, for a community that has watched too many of its buildings burn and needed someone to teach it how to protect itself. He is also, every time he puts on that gear, one of the few black firefighters in a department that is still working, slowly and imperfectly, toward the diversity it has long promised. He has navigated that reality with the same discipline he brings to everything else, quietly, methodically, by being so undeniably good at his job that the question of whether he belongs answers itself before anyone can ask it. He had never imagined that question would be asked in a burning street by a federal agent with handcuffs. The dispatch call comes in at 7:14 a.m. Structure fire, 4 alarms, residential apartment building, 400 block of Crane Street. Confirmed reports of civilians trapped on the upper floors. Engine Company 14 is rolling by 7:16 a.m. Darnell goes through his pre-entry check in the engine on the way to the scene. Gear secured, radio live, air pack ready, the kind of automatic muscle memory preparation that 8 years produces. He runs through what he knows about the building. 4 stories, 12 units, corner stairwell. Pre-incident survey completed 6 months ago. 1 resident with mobility issues on the 3rd floor, several older residents on the 4th. They arrive on scene at 7:21 a.m. Smoke is pouring from the 4th floor windows. Dispatch has confirmed 3 civilians unaccounted for, all on the upper floors. The incident commander is already establishing a perimeter. Darnell's company has their assignment. He grabs his helmet, confirms his radio, and runs for the entrance. He covers 38 feet in 11 seconds. He is 12 feet from the door when Vasquez steps into his path. Vasquez and Mills have been working the Crane Street corridor since 6:30 a.m. under a field enforcement directive designating the neighborhood a priority enforcement zone. The designation is based on demographic data. Civil rights attorneys will later describe it in court as a map drawn around where Black and Latino people live. In 45 minutes of working the corridor, Vasquez and Mills have stopped 3 people. All 3 are Black or Latino. All 3 are United States citizens. None of the stops are recorded in the morning report. When the fire trucks arrive, the agents do not leave. They watch from the corner. They watch the smoke. They watch the firefighters move. And when Darnell Cooper comes around the side of the engine in full turnout gear with the city insignia in 4-inch letters across his back running toward the building, Vasquez moves to intercept. Darnell hands over his department ID badge immediately. He does not argue about whether he should have to. He has enough training and enough experience of being Black in America to understand that the fastest path through this moment is documentation, not debate. He hands over the badge, points to the insignia on his gear, points to the fire behind them, and tells them exactly what they need to know. Engine Company 14, active rescue, 4th floor, 3 civilians. Call Chief Okafor, call dispatch, 2 minutes to verify all of it. Vasquez takes the badge, does not look at it, holds it at his side, tells Darnell they will verify that, and instructs him to turn around. The badge sits in Vasquez's hand for the next 15 minutes without being opened. It contains Darnell's photograph, his badge number, his 8-year service record, and the seal of the city fire department. Everything needed to confirm his identity and his profession in the time it takes to read 4 lines of text. It will not be read until Chief Okafor is standing 3 feet away demanding it. Mills produces handcuffs at 7:23 a.m. Darnell is cuffed, facing the building. He can see the 4th floor from where he stands. He can see the smoke changing. He knows what that change means. Every firefighter knows what that change means. And standing in handcuffs watching it happen is a particular kind of helplessness that no amount of professional training prepares you for. His company commander, Lieutenant Ray Osei, looks back from the entrance and realizes Darnell is not behind him. He radios dispatch. Dispatch radios Chief Okafor. Chief Sandra Okafor has been fire chief for 11 years. Before that, 22 years as a firefighter and company officer. She has run toward more burning buildings than she can count. And she is also, over 11 years as the city's first Black female fire chief, developed a precise and practiced understanding of what certain situations require and what they do not have time for. She receives the radio call at 7:27 a.m. One of her firefighters is in handcuffs in the street outside an active rescue scene. She puts her command vehicle in drive. She rolls to a stop directly behind the ICE transport vehicle at 7:31 a.m., blocking it completely. She steps out in full chief's uniform and walks to Vasquez. She tells him the man in handcuffs is one of her firefighters, that there is an active rescue in progress 40 feet behind them, and that she is not moving her vehicle until he is released. She tells him to open the badge in his hand. She tells him to call his supervisor. Vasquez tells her she is obstructing a federal enforcement action. Okafor tells him to call his supervisor. 3 Engine Company 14 firefighters have gathered near the ICE vehicle. They are not touching anyone or anything. They are standing in full gear, watching one of their own in handcuffs with a burning building behind him, and their presence says everything that does not need to be said out loud. Vasquez gets on his radio. His field supervisor asks if the detainee has provided documentation. Vasquez says yes. The supervisor asks if the documentation has been verified. There is a pause. The supervisor asks Vasquez to read what the documentation says. Vasquez opens the badge for the first time. City of Westfield Fire Department. Engine Company 14. Darnell J. Cooper. Badge number 471. The supervisor asks if there is an active fire on scene. Vasquez says yes. The supervisor says 3 words. Release him now. The handcuffs come off at 7:45 a.m. 22 minutes after they went on. Darnell does not wait. He takes his badge from Vasquez's hand without a word, clips it back to his gear, picks up his helmet from the ground where it fell when Mills cuffed him, and runs for the door. No speech, no confrontation. He will say everything that needs to be said in a courtroom. Right now there is a building on fire, and he is 22 minutes late. He reaches the 4th floor at 7:48 a.m. His company has located 2 of the 3 trapped civilians and is completing their evacuation. The third, 67-year-old Evelyn Marsh, has moved from her original position and is not where the pre-incident survey placed her. Darnell finds her at 7:51 a.m. in a back hallway, conscious but disoriented, unable to stand without assistance. He gets her out of the building at 7:56 a.m. She is transported to County General Hospital with smoke inhalation injuries. Her treating pulmonologist will later document permanent reduction in lung capacity. In a sworn statement prepared for the lawsuit, the physician will write that every additional minute of exposure at the documented smoke concentration on the 4th floor increases the probability and severity of permanent damage, and that 22 minutes is a meaningful, measurable, harmful interval. Not a rounding error, a cause. In the street, Chief Okafor watches Darnell go through the entrance. Then she turns back to Vasquez and Mills and tells them she will be filing formal complaints with the Department of Homeland Security, the mayor's office, the city council, and every civil rights attorney she can reach before end of business. She tells them she will also be contacting every fire chief in the state. Then she gets back in her command vehicle and drives to the command post to manage her scene. Vasquez and Mills stand on Crane Street with a half-completed detention form and a transport vehicle that went nowhere. The smoke from the 4th floor has begun to thin. The building is being brought under control. The man they handcuffed 40 feet from the door has already been inside for 3 minutes and has already found the woman they cost him 22 minutes reaching. Darnell Cooper completes his shift. That is the part of this story that does not make it into the legal filings or the policy memos or the congressional testimony, but it matters. After he brings Evelyn Marsh out of the building, after the fire is brought under control, after the scene is cleared and the equipment is stowed and the engine returns to the house, Darnell Cooper completes his shift. Because that is what he does. Because that is who he is. He also that evening sits in Chief Okafor's office and gives a full account of the detention for the department's official incident record. He is precise, time-stamped. He remembers every exchange, every instruction, every second of standing in handcuffs watching the smoke change color on the 4th floor. He has been trained to observe and report under pressure, and he does it now with the same discipline he brought to everything else that morning. Okafor files formal complaints with DHS, the mayor's office, and the city's Civil Rights Commission before 6 p.m. She also calls the hospital to check on Evelyn Marsh. The report she receives confirms what she already feared. Darnell visits Evelyn Marsh at County General the following morning. He brings her a card signed by every member of Engine Company 14. He sits with her for 40 minutes. He does not tell her about the handcuffs. He does not tell her about the 22 minutes. She finds out 3 weeks later when the lawsuit is filed and the story reaches the local news. And she calls Darnell at the firehouse and tells him she is sorry that happened to him. He tells her he is sorry it took him as long as it did to reach her. Neither of them says anything for a moment after that. 4 weeks after the incident, Darnell contacts attorney Carolyn Reeves, a civil rights attorney with a record of successful federal suits against law enforcement agencies for racial discrimination and unlawful detention. Reeves has litigated cases against police departments, federal agencies, and municipal governments. She has also, separately, represented Evelyn Marsh's family since the day the pulmonology report was filed. She meets with Darnell and reviews everything. The body camera footage from Vasquez's camera. The dispatch timeline. The badge that sat unexamined in Vasquez's hand for 15 minutes. The prior complaints against both agents. The neighborhood designation memo. The pulmonology report. Chief Okafor's formal incident statement. She tells him they have a strong case on every count. Then she asks him what he wants from it. Darnell's answer takes about 4 seconds. He says he wants it to be impossible for this to happen to the next firefighter, or paramedic, or nurse, or anyone in a uniform running toward an emergency while black. He wants the policy changed, the agents held accountable, and the system that put them on that corner with that directive dismantled at its source. Reeves tells him that is exactly what they are going to fight for. 5 weeks after the incident, 2 simultaneous lawsuits are filed in federal district court. The first lawsuit, Cooper versus Department of Homeland Security, names ICE agent Carlos Vasquez, ICE agent Timothy Mills, and the supervising officer who issued the Crane Street Enforcement Directive as defendants. The claims include unlawful detention under the Fourth Amendment, civil rights violations under 42 United States Code Section 1983, racial profiling under federal equal protection guarantees, violation of the federal sensitive locations policy prohibiting ICE enforcement actions at active emergency scenes, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The second lawsuit, filed simultaneously on behalf of Evelyn Marsh, names the same defendants and adds a direct claim for the aggravation of injuries resulting from the delayed emergency response, with an explicit allegation of proximate causation between the 22-minute detention and the permanent lung damage she sustained. The evidence assembled is visually and factually overwhelming. Vasquez's own body camera footage becomes Exhibit A, professionally analyzed and time-stamped. The insignia on Darnell's chest and back, in 4-inch letters, visible in the first frame. The department ID badge handed over at 7:23 a.m. The badge held at Vasquez's side, unexamined, until 7:38 a.m., when Chief Okafor demands he open it. 15 minutes, every second time-stamped, every frame in evidence. The dispatch records become Exhibit B. Fire reported at 7:12 a.m. Engine Company 14 dispatched at 7:14 a.m. Arrival on scene at 7:21 a.m. Darnell detained at 7:23 a.m. Handcuffs removed at 7:45 a.m. Evelyn Marsh located at 7:51 a.m. Marsh removed from building at 7:56 a.m. The timeline does not require interpretation. It speaks for itself. Evelyn Marsh's medical records and the treating pulmonologist's sworn expert report become Exhibit C. Permanent reduction in lung capacity. The physician's conclusion that 22 additional minutes of smoke exposure at documented concentration levels constitutes a meaningful and causally significant interval. The kind of expert opinion that turns a policy argument into a personal one. Vasquez and Mills's prior complaint records become Exhibit D. 7 combined complaints for racially motivated stops and detentions over 5 years, all involving Black or Latino individuals, all dismissed without formal disciplinary action. The pattern is not a coincidence. It is a record. The Crane Street Priority Enforcement Zone Designation Memo becomes Exhibit E. Civil rights analysis maps the zone boundaries against census demographic data. The correlation between the zone's borders and the census blocks with the highest percentages of Black and Latino residents is not approximate. It is precise. The memo cites no specific criminal intelligence, no tip, no incident pattern, just demographics. 3 expert witnesses are secured. A use of force specialist who will testify that detaining a uniformed first responder during an active emergency without reviewing available documentation fails every standard of reasonable federal enforcement conduct. A civil rights scholar who will testify about the documented pattern of ICE enforcement actions in demographically targeted zones and their racially disparate impact. And Evelyn Marsh's pulmonologist, who will testify in plain language about what 22 minutes costs a 67-year-old woman in a smoke-filled hallway. DHS attorneys receive the complete evidence package on a Friday. Settlement discussions begin the following Monday. The deposition of Carlos Vasquez takes place 8 months after the incident. Attorney Reeves conducts it with Darnell present. She asks Vasquez to describe what made Darnell Cooper appear suspicious. Vasquez says the subject was running and appeared agitated. Reeves asks whether running toward an active fire scene while wearing full firefighting gear could account for both of those observations. Vasquez says he was not certain the subject was a firefighter at the time. Reeves asks him to describe what a firefighter responding to an active fire typically looks like. Vasquez does not answer. Reeves places a still frame from the body camera footage on the table. City of Westfield Fire Department insignia, 4-inch letters, visible in the first frame of the footage before Vasquez said a single word. She asks Vasquez whether he saw the insignia. He says he was focused on the subject's movement. She asks whether the insignia was visible. He says yes. She asks him when he first examined the department ID badge. He says during the stop. She places the body camera timestamp on the table next to the still frame. Badge received, 7:23 a.m. Badge opened, 7:38 a.m. She asks him to explain the 15-minute gap. He says he was managing the situation. She asks what aspect of managing the situation required holding an unexamined badge for 15 minutes while a building burned 40 feet away. Vasquez does not have an answer for that. Reeves then asks him about the 14 people who walked through the Crane Street corridor in the 35 minutes before Darnell arrived. The security camera footage has captured all of them. She asks Vasquez to confirm how many of those 14 people were stopped. He says none. She asks him to confirm the racial demographics of those 14 people as captured on the security footage. His attorney objects. The objection is overruled. Would you have stopped a white man in the same gear, running in the same direction? Reeves asks. Vasquez says he cannot speculate about hypothetical situations. Reeves tells him it is not hypothetical. She places the security footage still frames on the table. 14 people. 0 stops. Then the first black man to run through the corridor. Handcuffs in 90 seconds. She asks him again. He does not answer. And in federal court, that silence is its own kind of answer. $16.1 million. $3.8 million directly to Darnell Cooper. $1.9 million for civil rights violations, unlawful detention, and racial profiling. $1.1 million for emotional distress and the specific and documented trauma of being handcuffed in full gear 40 feet from a building with trapped civilians inside. $800,000 in direct recognition of the deliberate interference with his professional duties during an active life safety emergency. $2.1 million to Evelyn Marsh and her family, with an explicit written acknowledgement in the settlement agreement of the causal connection between the 22-minute detention and the permanent lung damage she sustained. Her attorneys insisted on the written acknowledgement. The language is specific, unambiguous, and part of the public record. $10.2 million in punitive damages against the Department of Homeland Security, structured to reflect both the individual agent's conduct and the systemic failures. The enforcement directive, the complaint dismissals, the zone designation, the training gaps that put Vasquez and Mills on that corner with the authority to do what they did. Agent Carlos Vasquez, terminated for cause, barred from federal law enforcement in the state, personally liable for $300,000. Agent Timothy Mills, terminated for cause, barred from federal law enforcement in the state, personally liable for $300,000. The supervising officer who issued the Crane Street directive, demoted, suspended 60 days, placed on permanent supervisory probation. The 7 prior complaints against both agents are reopened, all found meritorious, and the reviewing officers who dismissed them are formally reprimanded. The Department of Homeland Security issues an immediate and mandatory policy revision, explicitly prohibiting ICE enforcement actions within any active emergency response perimeter, and requiring all field agents to yield to uniformed first responders during any emergency operation, regardless of enforcement priorities. The policy is non-waivable. Violation triggers automatic termination review. Chief Sandra Okafor testifies before the House Committee on Homeland Security. She brings the dispatch timeline. She brings the body camera footage. She brings Evelyn Marsh's pulmonology report. She places all three on the table and tells the committee that what happened on Crane Street was not a malfunction of the system. It was the system functioning exactly as it had been designed to function in a neighborhood that had been designated on the basis of who lived there as a place where black men running required federal intervention. Congress passes the First Responder Protection Act, establishing criminal penalties for any law enforcement action that demonstrably interferes with emergency response operations and creating personal civil liability for any agent who detains a uniformed first responder during an active emergency. The bill is named in its legislative record after the incident on Crane Street. 6 months after the settlement, Darnell Cooper is still at Engine Company 14, still running toward burning buildings. Still the first person through the door when the call comes in and the engine rolls and the smoke is visible from 2 blocks away. He does not talk about the settlement much. He talks about Evelyn Marsh. He visited her 3 times after her discharge from County General, and when she was well enough, he brought her to the firehouse for a tour and introduced her to the company. She shook everyone's hand. She told them they were all heroes. Darnell told her she was the bravest person he had met that year, and she laughed and said that was a low bar given what she had been through. He used a portion of the settlement to expand his youth fire safety program from 3 schools to 9. He hired 2 additional instructors. He added the curriculum component about what to do if you cannot reach the door, about smoke and heat and the physics of fire in a residential building, because the thing that keeps him up at night is not the handcuffs. It is the image of Evelyn Marsh moving away from the window in a smoke-filled hallway, away from where his company was looking, away from the door, because she did not know which way to go and there was no one there to tell her yet. He also, once, at a community forum 6 months after the settlement, was asked whether he had forgiven Vasquez and Mills. He thought about it for a long moment. Then he said forgiveness was not really the question he was sitting with. The question he was sitting with was simpler and harder than that. He said, I was 40 feet from the door. I had the gear on. I had the badge. I had the insignia. I had the building burning behind me. And none of it was enough to make them see me as someone who belonged there. That is not a question of forgiveness. That is a question of what this country actually believes about black men. And I do not have an answer to that yet. I am still working on it. $16.1 million bought a federal policy revision, 2 terminations, a congressional law, mandatory retraining for every ICE field agent in the country, a formal and enforceable prohibition on enforcement actions during emergency response operations that should have existed long before April 3rd. It also bought Evelyn Marsh $2.1 million and a written acknowledgement in a federal settlement agreement that what happened to her lungs was connected to what happened to Darnell in that parking lot. That acknowledgement matters. It is not an abstraction. It is a 67-year-old woman's permanent injury written into the public record as a consequence of a decision made by 2 agents who saw a black man running and decided, before he said a word, that he required explaining. But $16.1 million did not change what happens in the moment before the handcuffs come out. It did not change the calculation Vasquez ran when he saw Darnell come around that engine truck. It did not change the 40 feet or the 22 minutes or the 15 minutes that badge sat unread in Vasquez's hand while the smoke changed color on the 4th floor. It did not give Evelyn Marsh her lung capacity back. The system became more expensive. For some things, more expensive is not enough. And this story is honest about that, even as it accounts for everything that was won. Darnell Cooper is a firefighter. 8 years. 37 confirmed rescues. 6 commendations for valor. Firefighter of the Year, 2 years running. He was in full turnout gear with his department insignia visible on his chest and his badge in his hand, and a building on fire 40 feet behind him. He was in handcuffs for 22 minutes. His badge sat unread for 15 of them. So here is my question. If a full firefighting uniform, a city-issued badge, a department insignia in 4-inch letters, and an active 4-alarm fire visible from where the agents were standing were not enough to prevent this detention, what would have been enough? Should ICE agents who detain uniformed first responders during active emergencies face criminal charges for any harm that results from the delayed response? And should the officers who dismissed 7 prior complaints against Vasquez and Mills face personal liability for every incident their inaction made possible? Share your thoughts in the comments. This story proves that a uniform does not protect you from suspicion. A badge does not protect you from suspicion. A burning building 40 feet behind you does not protect you from suspicion. But it also proves that a fire chief who parks her vehicle across a federal transport and refuses to move it changes the outcome. That a pattern documented in federal court becomes a policy that protects the next person. That fighting back, with body camera footage and dispatch timestamps and a pulmonologist's sworn report and every second of evidence documented and preserved, matters. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next story.